Hey guys, we're in end times, and the things that are going on in this world are not of men, but of fallen entities. And the psychopaths trying to rule this world and change the image of God into the image of the beast through this transhumanist agenda, I believe, are fallen angels, which are prophesied to return to the earth before the end times to be judged. I'm putting Jude and Second Peter 2 side by side. These are parallel verses. And this has been taught all I've ever heard. I've even taught it this way, that this is talking about false prophets in the flesh and blood teaching false gospels to the world. And I think that's part of it. But a deeper revelation that I'm seeing with Jude and Second Peter 2 is that this is indeed talking about fallen angels. This is talking about spiritual wickedness in high places who come upon the earth to deceive mankind, and specifically in the end times. And so let me show you this. I'll put Jude and Second Peter 2 side by side here. On the left, verse 4 of Jude, there are certain men crept in unawares who were before of old ordained to this condemnation. Ungodly men. I think again, these men, quote unquote, men who were before of old ordained to this condemnation are fallen angels who have sinned in the past, which left their first estate, which were reserved to be judged, and now are here to be judged on this earth, trying to deceive men in the process. 2 Peter 2, verse 1, refers to them as false prophet and false teachers who privily shall bring in damnable heresies. And then you go down to Jude, and immediately in both chapters, it begins to talk about the fallen angels. In verse 6 of Jude on the left, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting change unto darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. I think this is what it's talking about. I think it's talking about the fallen angels who have been let loose and are now on earth deceiving men, these psychopaths, trying to keep this transhumanist movement going through the needle and through genetic engineering and through nanotechnology that we're seeing right now, right in the middle of. This is what these chapters are referring to. If you look at 2 Peter 2, verse 4, it discusses the fallen angels again. For God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. And then it talks about, in 2 Peter 2, talks about Noah in the old world being judged by the flood, talks about Sodom and Gomorrah being judged by eternal fire. In Jude, in verse 7, it refers to the same thing with Sodom and Gomorrah, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. But then it goes down in verse 8, likewise, also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. I think these are fallen angels that this verse is describing. If you go down to 2 Peter 2, it talks about the same things. But chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise government. Presumptuous are they, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. And then in verse 9, and this is the real clue that these passages, that these chapters are speaking of spiritual entities, spiritual wickedness in high places that have come to the earth and are ready to be judged by God during these end times. In verse 9, after just talking about these filthy dreamers, they defile the flesh, they despise dominion, they speak evil of dignities, then it says in verse 9, yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but says, the Lord rebuke thee. If you look at that same parallel verse in verse 11 of 2 Peter 2, it says, whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before the Lord. So these angels, which are greater in power and might, are the archangels, such as Michael, when contending with the fallen angels, such as the devil. So this is not talking about men in the flesh that were born of men. These are talking of spiritual entities of wickedness that are here in the last days to be judged by God and are trying to deceive men before it all goes down. Says in verse 12, but these, speaking of the lesser angels, not the angels which are greater in power and might, such as Michael the archangel, but these lesser angels as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. It speaks of the same things in verse 10 of Jude. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally as brute beasts. Again, these are fallen angels that this is speaking of, that have not kept their first estate, but have come down, have made that decision to rebel against God, to speak evil of his power, of his glory, speak evil of dignities. Greater angels, such as Michael, dare not do that, and they dare not even accuse the lesser angels which did that, but just simply say, the Lord rebuke thee. But these lesser angels, which are here right now trying to deceive men through technology, which is not of this world, this genetic engineering, this nanotechnology that we're seeing now, these are natural brute beasts. These are fallen entities in flesh and blood, deceiving men that are here right now. These are spots in your feast of charity. These are clouds without water. These are twice dead spiritual entities. They are wandering stars. The wandering stars, that's always referring to angelic beings, not humans. And it says, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. Well, what did it say earlier in the chapter? Who is reserved in everlasting chains under darkness into the judgment? It's the angels which have not kept their first estate. So these chapters are talking about these murmurers, these complainers walking after their own lust. These are speaking of spiritual entities, fallen angels who have rebelled against God, that are here now trying to deceive men. They've forsaken the right way. They've gone astray. They love the way of Balaam. They love the way of unrighteousness. They speak great swelling words. They allure the lust of the flesh. And there's many of them here. There's many of them here right now. They're in our political system. They're in Hollywood. They're in the medical community. They are in your federal, state, and local governments all over the world in different countries. They're here to deceive in these end times. So look at this, and there's so much more. If you look in other chapters, verses of the Bible, you will begin to see these deeper layers about workers of iniquity, those who defile the flesh, those who make unclean their dwelling places and their habitation, the temple of God, if you will. You know, we are bought with a price, and believers are the temple of God. But these are natural brute beasts. These are in the flesh right now, deceiving through pharmakia, They're deceiving through policies, throughout government, throughout the world, that are in lockstep with each other. This is not of this world. Everything that you are experiencing right now. And Jude and and 2 Peter 2, which are right towards the end of the Bible before the book of the Revelator, John, the book of Revelation, it's speaking of this very time. It's speaking of these entities that are here right now trying to deceive the world. They are psychopaths. They are not human. And once you understand that, then everything that's going on will begin to make sense. God bless.